Hi, good afternoon. So my talk is titled Shrine Identity. I start first talking about soul. You see, I'm not referring to what Armenian institutions love to push as soul, national spirit with a sacred overtone. I doubt about the nature of that spirit, and I doubt about its existence too. The way I refer to soul is rooted in aesthetics, where it has been defined as the faculty of creating aesthetic ideas, presenting aesthetic ideas, which is more or less mainly creating beauty, the beautiful. Some of the pre-1915 Armenian writers saw it that way too. For them, it was the individual as a recipient of the heartbeats, they said, of a culture, who would create through those heartbeats. Among them, Daniel Varoujan specifically considered soul as the power of creating. But then we know Varoujan was killed in 1915 and many others along the way. What happened in 1915 was not just a genocide. It was something much more profound, catastrophic. A catastrophe way beyond the murdered persons and lost lands and properties. It was a catastrophe that left Armenians unable to create, to become in their language and their culture. Because the catastrophe, as writer Hagop Gulludjian would put it, had affected their soul, that soul, their power to create. It left Armenians contemplating the dead, the relics, as you saw. It wasn't that they stopped creating. What they did was rather to recreate, to reproduce the dead instead of creating works which, although legitimately rooted in the past, would qualify as innovative. Creating and reproducing the past is the same as building shrines and consuming shrines. What is a shrine? In the past, originally it meant in Latin a box or a case, a chest for books, or a box for relics, a reliquary. Armenians got used to consume predominantly works that assimilate with these boxes. They still do. Just look at any diaspora community calendar and you'll see it full of events celebrating shrines every single week. Weekly presentations of new shrine books. You hear only about authors who write about grandmothers and the genocide. You will never hear about those authors who get out to create and to innovate. That is what leads to the fundamental sterility and the infertility that involves a diasporic condition. Let's look at the shrine issue from another angle. Armenians in diaspora usually think about themselves as stuck or torn in between two states, the past versus the present, their language and culture versus the local dominant language and culture. It's as if they were stuck in a transition. Sociologists have a name for this state. It's called the liminal state, the place of in-betweenness. I'll say it in another way. Standing in between, Armenians see a dichotomy. Either you stay in the previous stage and you alienate yourself from the outer world, or you jump to the other side and you alienate yourself from your past, from your language and culture. In other words, you alienate yourself from who you are and from your soul. That is your power to create the beautiful as a holder of Armenian cultural identity. Is there a third way? Yes, it is staying in between. Instead of considering yourself trapped in between, you may just as well embrace in-betweenness. That's what the great poet of diaspora, Nicholas Sarafian, did 60 years ago. He not only did that, but he also insisted on moving, fluctuating, swaying between the two sides. Not only he stays on that sway, he adopts it as his place. So motion is his place. So the dissolution of previously held structures, we know, engenders opportunities. That's why in between is, according to great anthropologist Victor Turner, the kingdom of pure possibility. the place of innovation, a fertile space. That's why diasporan identity is a construction without a linear teleological course. It doesn't have to reach somewhere. It only has to reach motion, which is basically vitality. We should stop attempting to ignore it or hide from the liminal condition as if it were a problem. It is a crisis, yes, but it is a crisis not to be solved, but to be embraced. It's to jump in the water and to swim, to make a way, that is, to innovate again. Diaspora is not a destination to be reached because it is authentically and permanently a liminal space. In a suicidal way, communities reject this. The old diaspora doesn't want to leave the first stage. At the same time, the new diaspora, the last couple decades, is very quick to jump directly onto a third stage. One is preservationist, the other assimilationist. The third way, that is to settle and to dwell on the threshold, is fundamentally resisted by the preservationist ideology. That's why, beginning from the mid-1930s, all that which was not compatible with the concept of hayapahpanum, preservationism, was barred from the intellectual exchange. So hayapahpanum, maintaining Armenianness, preservation, appears to be a very attractive idea until we venture deeper and start to seriously think about it. Conservation implies guarding, placing sentinels around, putting things in a bottle like pickles, closing it. They're all the same: pickles, turshi, khachkars, and monuments, void of new creation, void of innovation. So shrine identity is like pickle identity or turshi identity. Conservation creates an imaginary fence. Those who think as contemporaries to the outer world, or contemporaries to themselves, basically, will be quick to jump out of the fence to the other side and will run elsewhere. A fence is a limit, which by nature is an invitation to transgress. We should erase the boundaries. Instead of jumping the fence toward the present time, it is about bringing the present time among us. Instead of preserving, it is to exist and persist. It is an existentialist attitude instead of a traditional community posture of we are who we are, therefore we do not become because we already are. How can we perform this? How can we relate to the outside without dying as who we are? When we talk about the outside and the possibility to relate to the outside, we say that we go, that we leave, that we go away. I'll try to use another word I've borrowed from the greatest Armenian author alive, Hagop Gulludjian. He says, I enter outside. The difference is subtle but substantial. When you enter outside, you're not emphasizing the leaving, the going away. You're not abandoning what is yours. There are two ways to be outside, to get outside. One is to escape and to adopt it exclusively. The other is to enter outside as a bearer of your culture. The world is a whole massive outsideness now. As opposed to what used to happen before, where the world would stay outside, now it invades, it pervades our environment. Every day, increasingly more, it wants to get inside, uninvited, because of all the technological progress and the virtualization of civilization and life. What to do then? My answer is to enter outside in order to create relatable works from within our culture and language, from within our culture and language. Otherwise, the only commonality I would have with you is racial. And I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in what DNA you may have, but in how I can relate to your creation. That is, to how you exist or how you become, not who you are. And I relate to that when it's beautiful. And because it's in a language that makes me feel at home. And by language, I obviously understand the written language, but also the musical language, architectural language, the dance language, the food language, and also that subtle and underlying language of shared pains, frustrations, love, and shared beauty. We have to stop focusing on identity as a moral obligation and start seeing it as a beautiful choice. When we create what we deem beautiful and desired, that's how we survive. Because what is ultimately a nation? What is the concept of a national group? But the device in order to receive, just a device, in order to receive, to experience and enjoy, and to transmit, to share what we consider beautiful. I can't stress enough the sharing aspect of culture and identity. It is shrine identity versus shareable creativity. Shrine identity may be overcome only by creating and sharing. Thank you.